the same mistake this time. We are the children, the last generation. We are the ones they left behind. And I wonder when we are ever gonna change. Living under the fear till nothing else remains. We don't need another hero. We don't need to know the way home. All we want is life beyond the Thunderdome. Looking for something we can rely on.
Time slips. A haunted office building on a haunted street. A haunted coal town. Mysterious black cats. Unexplained light anomalies. UFOs, UAPs in the air and on the ground. Bridges in liminal spaces. Cryptids, shamans, and a werewolf. Disclosure: you don't need a ranch in Utah. All this and more happens in rural southwestern Pennsylvania. Coming soon from Haunted Hills and Hollows 1 and 2 author Kevin Paul, Politics and the Paranormal in Greene County, Pennsylvania. Available this fall on Amazon and at other fine booksellers. Diving into the headlines of the mysterious and unexplained, this is The Unseen News with Guy Ticker, where the extraordinary is just the beginning. Woman claims to have encountered and photographed Bigfoot on tribal land in Arizona. Reportedly taken on Navajo Nation land, a photograph alleged to be Bigfoot was captured at the end of a small canyon in Arizona. The photo was recently revealed to the Rocky Mountain Sasquatch Organization. Someone else who reported seeing Bigfoot in Arizona wrote in, quote, "I stood and watched a Sasquatch for over 40 minutes in Azusa Canyon, which is in Southern California, not 20 miles as the crow flies from downtown Los Angeles." And that wraps up tonight's top news stories. This is Guy Ticker on the Night Dreams Talk Radio Network. You are listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio Network, the home of Night Dreams Talk Radio, with Gary Anderson, syndicated worldwide. Paranormal Talk Radio, like you remember.
Well, I hope everybody had a great Christmas. Well, I did in a way. You know, a lot of people I want to say thank you to. I got a lot of emails, literally hundreds of emails from people all over the world, you know, saying that they were surprised and wishing me well. I've had, 2 heart attacks back on after the night of the last show, which was December 6th. After the show, I went and watched TV for a little while and kind of felt off a little bit with a back pain. By the time I got into the bedroom, it progressed to my arm, to my chest, and I broke out into the sweats, and I felt like I was going to vomit. This all happened probably within about a 4-minute time frame. I sat there and I did the smart thing. I first figured maybe I'm getting sick, but I figured, I did lay down for a second, and that didn't help. So I called the paramedics, and it took them maybe a few minutes to get there. Thank God they're close by. And I died the first time, I was told about 2 minutes after they got into the bedroom to find out what was going on with me. They said I died, and I was dead for 2 minutes before they brought me back. On the way to the hospital, They diverted me from the local hospital to another hospital because I died a second time. And you know what, JC? I'm going to say this. A lot of people, don't realize. People come up. We've interviewed people who have had near-death experiences and all that stuff. And my friend Art Bell was terrified after John Lear told him not to go to the light. It's a trick. In my case, JC, when I died, I didn't see my relatives. I didn't see a bright light. I didn't hear anything. But what I was surrounded in darkness, darker than dark. And what was interesting is I felt really content. The pain went away. All my worries went away. And I just kind of was in awe. I was so relaxed. It felt so good.
Was there any sounds or smells, or did you want to leave? Or
I honestly didn't want to leave.
Right.
I was that content in that darkness.
And you didn't hear any voices from anybody or anything?
I didn't hear no voices. Not even from the IRS. No.
And no white lights or none of that stuff?
No bright lights, no nothing.
Oh, we darn.
Just straight darkness. And Art was really, really messed up because, John Lear would always tell, Art, don't go into the light. It's a trick. You want to be into the darkness. Now, 2 weeks before John Lear died, I was talking to him on the phone, and he admitted to me, hey, he was wrong. You want to go to the lightness, to the light. I don't know. All I know is I felt really content.
Right. And maybe if you'd been there longer, maybe you would have, maybe that's when things would have started, maybe seen something more or something. Who knows? We don't know.
I don't want to go and find out again.
I'll take your word for it. I don't blame you. I don't want you to go either.
Hey, all this drone thing while I was in the hospital, it kind of dried up. If you went on TikTok and all these other things, it was drones. Let's build the wall. It's the drone thing. Everybody was talking about drones. Oh, they're alien invasion. It's this, it's that. And now it's hardly anything about it.
Yeah, they're still out there, but they're, to me, 100%, they're not aliens. They're man-made stuff, but, people's got some kind of agendas and we know what it is, or else we would be shooting. Listen, we spent $300,000 to shoot down a Chinese balloon a year or two ago. So you think they're going to let these fly over if they didn't know what they were?
Oh, no. But, here's the thing. You have to really think about this. Till this stuff started appearing, how many people were going outside and looking up in the sky? How many people were taking binoculars looking up in the sky looking for this stuff? And you have to understand, it's like Walmart, Amazon, and a whole bunch of companies. They use these drones to transport stuff back and forth now. So there's a lot of drones out there.
Yeah, that reminds me. The one politician there, I think it was in New Jersey, asked him, and he said, well, we're not shooting them, or where he's from. He said, we're not shooting them down because it could be, Amazon or FedEx delivering packages. And the one guy says, I didn't know you had such care for their delivery system.
Well, it's really got out of control. Let's face it. You got people that have drones. You have government agency. You got NASA. You got Walmart. You got Amazon. And a whole bunch of other companies using drones. NASA has drones. Everybody has drones now. And you know what? Again, let's face it. Why would aliens have drones? They're going to have more technology than drones, but let's face it.
Yeah. And there's a lot of theories behind who's behind them and what they're doing with them out there. So that's a whole nother ballgame.
Oh, tonight we're going to talk about 1947. Roswell with Kevin Randall. We got him back. So we'll have him on right after this. So stay tuned. You're listening to me, Gary, on Night Dreams Talk Radio.
I got chills, they're multiplying, and I'm losing control. 'Cause the power you're supplying, it's electrifying. You better
Kevin D. Randall is a retired Army lieutenant colonel who served in Vietnam as a helicopter pilot and aircraft commander, accumulating more than 1,100 hours of combat flight time. In 2003, he deployed to Iraq as an intelligence officer. He served on active duty with the Army and later the Air Force. He was a member of the Iowa National Guard on his deployment into the Middle East. He retired from the National Guard in 2009. Kevin is a graduate of the University of Iowa, has advanced degrees from California Coast University and American Military University. He's taught classes at both the community college and the university level. His interest in UFOs began as a teenager when he investigated a sighting while living in Colorado. His big question then was if the object had been sharply defined or had been a ball of light. From that point, he's investigated hundreds of sightings around the country, including nearly 3 decades researching the events in Roswell. He's written more than 25 books about UFOs, and he now hosts a weekly UFO update on Coast to Coast AM. His UFO-related blog, A Different Perspective, can be found at www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com. His blog on his Vietnam experiences can be found at www.vietnamgroundzero.blogspot.com.
Well, Kevin, welcome back to the show. And again, I want to thank you for the service to our nation.
Well, thank you for that. I'm glad to be back.
Well, I'm glad to have you back. What do you think about this drone thing? I really got a charge out of it, I'll be honest with you.
I think you pretty well hit the nose on the head. It's terrestrial objects, and it's probably a bit of hysteria thrown in with some observations of drones that are not easily identifiable, but an awful lot of it, I think, is misidentification. People are now looking up who were not looking up before. They've taken their eyes off their phones and looked into the sky and seen the lights traveling by. But I think that if you listen, President-elect Trump, for example, said that he thought the whole thing, the government knew what was going on, and a reporter asked him, "Have you been briefed?" And he says, "Well, I don't want to comment on that." Not too long after that, Nancy Mace, who is a congresswoman, just last Sunday, as a matter of fact, was talking about the drones and said she'd been in a classified briefing, and it was probably terrestrial in origin, and that 2 of the shapes were repeating themselves, which she found interesting, but she didn't want to talk about it because it was a classified briefing. So we've had people on the inside, people in the government talking about it not being anything that's harmful or dangerous, probably terrestrially based, and I think the hysteria is kind of overblown.
I think it really got out of control. And, let's face it, a lot of podcasts, a lot of people out there, it was a way to get more, listeners to their podcasts. They hyped this thing up. But, again, I think a lot of people are going to have egg on their face because, again, Amazon, Walmart, all kinds of businesses use drones. People have drones. Government has drones. And, again, people looking up in the sky at night, they would have never realized it unless what happened.
Well, I saw an article not that long ago that a guy in Florida had shot down one of the drones. It turned out to be a Walmart drone, and he ended up having to pay $5,000 to Walmart for destroying their drone.
I saw that. Oh boy, that taught that guy a lesson, didn't it?
Well, I think it's a lesson for all of us. And the other problem you have is if you're firing a high-powered rifle into the sky at an angle or a slant, that bullet's going to come down somewhere, and it could injure or kill somebody. There are any number of instances where people were firing celebratory gunfire, which I've always thought was a ridiculous idea. But depending on the trajectory of the round, people can be killed and injured by it. But it's something that should be stopped.
Well, I saw that in Vietnam. There were some times the guys would get really excited and fire up in the sky, and what goes up comes down.
If you fire straight up, I think Mythbusters pretty much prove that won't be dangerous. But if you're firing at an angle, then that round doesn't burn up its kinetic energy that quick, and it can be deadly.
Oh,
there's a number of stories where people have been killed by the celebratory gunfire. So, I mean, shooting up into the sky is not the thing to do.
No. Back here a couple of years ago in my area, a guy was out target shooting with a .22. And he didn't realize how far a 22 shell would go. And he missed the target, and he killed a girl about a quarter mile away.
He obviously didn't figure out, if I missed a target, where's the round going to go, which if you're a trained shooter, that's one of the things you look at. I'm going to shoot at this. If I miss, where will the round go? How will it be stopped? That's why rifle ranges and gun ranges have big berms behind them, is to stop the round in case you miss.
Oh, yeah. Now, you're young. Did you have anything strange in the paranormal or UFO or ET contact?
No, not really. My interest evolved from my mother's interest in science fiction. And science fiction, of course, is about alien visitation, interstellar flight, alien civilizations, and that sort of thing. So it's not a big step from science fiction in that realm into the UFOs. She took me to see a movie, Earth versus the Flying Saucer, when I was a little kid, and that kind of sparked my interest in the UFO phenomenon.
That was a good movie, by the way.
Yeah, well, Don Quixote didn't care for it, but no, it was a good movie. And I say that because it was supposedly based on one of his first books, and really all they took was the title of the book, Earth versus Flying Saucers from his book, and then just went off onto a real interesting fantasy.
You know, another thing, we've interviewed a lot of people on the show on, people that like Lou and all these other people about disclosure. But when you really talk to these people and you go, well, what more do you want? 1947, Roswell. And a lot of these people right to my ears said to me, well, that doesn't count. That happened a long time ago. What is wrong with these people?
I don't know. I mean, I can think of any number of historical precedents that would negate that argument. But the point is, if Roswell hadn't happened, I think we'd be having a different discussion. There is no terrestrial explanation for Roswell, regardless of what people say. They trot out this Project Mogul as the explanation, a top secret balloon. The equipment being used in the flights taking place in New Mexico in June and July of 1947 were not classified. There was no classification there. The purpose was classified, but what was going on was not classified. And if you look at the documentation, they single out flight number 4 as the culprit in this. But according to the documentation, flight number 4 never flew. It did not get off the ground. The second point is, I was talking to Charles Moore, who was one of the project engineers with Project Mogul, or what he insisted on calling the New York University balloon flights. He told me that the flight number 4 was configured exactly as flight number 5, which did fly. We have a diagram of flight number 5. There are no ray wind targets on it. If flight number 4 was configured exactly that same way, then there was nothing to leave the metallic debris that Mac Brazel found, and it certainly negates the picture taken in General Ramey's office, because there is a ray wind target in there, and that means what was photographed in General Ramey's office was a substitution for the real stuff.
Do you think that was possible?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, how hard would it be to get a ray wind target and a weather balloon? You're in the military. Fort Lawton, Fort Sill in Lawton, Oklahoma. It's not that far from Fort Worth, Texas. And I mentioned Fort Sill simply because that's the home of Army artillery, and they used ray wind targets and weather balloons all the time in their instruction and their practice ranges there in Oklahoma. Irving Newton, who was the weather officer that identified the balloon as a balloon and the ray wind target as a ray wind target in Ramey's office, it told me that he didn't have any of those available in Fort Worth, but he knew where to get them. So, I mean, all of the things that go about the explanation have been negated. I do not understand why the skeptical community will criticize us on the other side of the fence for the most ridiculous statement, and yet they don't say, well, our problem here is with the Mogul explanation is the documentation proves that flight never flew. Where did that debris come from? Well, the answer is, what we have right now, the only answer is extraterrestrial. There's no known terrestrial source for the debris that Mac Brazel found actually up near Corona, New Mexico, not that far from Roswell.
Well, you did a lot of research on Roswell, a lot, more than probably anybody else on this earth. And if you really think about this, the whole thing, when you hear the whistleblowers, right? Well, I know somebody who knows somebody who saw a crashed UFO, or knows somebody who's in a retrieval unit, or knows somebody this. They know. But when you go to Roswell, there were so many witnesses to what was going on, to the circumstances of that night and the days after.
Well, I can say I spoke to an awful lot of the witnesses in Roswell, so I'm very close to the core of the event. I do want to make one quick correction. I think when you say I know more than anybody else about Roswell, I would suggest that Tom Carey and Don Schmidt.
Well, yeah, next to them. Yes, you all three of them.
Much as I do. So I think it's important to point that out. But I think that, if you're talking about, well, my father talked to somebody who knew about the crash, that's not doing us any good. I talked to the people who were directly involved. And we start with General, well, he was a general at one point, Colonel Blanchard's staff there in Roswell. I talked to the operations officer who provided information. We talked to any number of officers, Edwin Easley, the provost marshal, who told me it was extraterrestrial. Not in so many words. What happened in the conversation is I asked Easley, are we following the right path? And he said, what do you mean? And I said, we think it was extraterrestrial. And he said, well, let me put it this way. You're not following the wrong path. In essence, telling us the extraterrestrial was the right path to follow. And there's a whole list of people who were in Roswell, are very credible people. We can prove they were there, and told us, Tom, Don, and me, in various conversations, that the thing was not of this earth. Jesse Marcel Sr., the intelligence officer, Roswell, we have videotape. Originally it was on film, but we have tape of Jesse Marcel saying this was something that came to Earth, but it was not from Earth. And so, here's the guy who was there. He examined the debris. We have the record of what he said about it. And the skeptics say, well, he was talking about that 35 years later. How could he know it was not of this earth? And it's because he handled it, and he knew what was available, what the components were of our various aviation assets were, and he was unable to identify it. And we're supposed to believe, well, what it really was a common weather balloon, a neoprene rubber weather balloon, and a ray wind target, which were very common. They used them in World War II. Weather stations all around the country were using that. There was a guy in Circleville, Ohio, Sherman Campbell. It was a farmer. He found a weather balloon and a ray wind target in his cornfield when he was out working one day in July of 1947, as a matter of fact. And he was able to identify it as a weather balloon and a ray wind target. He took it to the local sheriff, who was able to identify it as a weather balloon and a ray wind target. And it was on display in the newspaper office for a number of weeks afterwards. His daughter, in the newspaper clippings, it said it was his wife, but I actually talked to her. It was his daughter, and there's a picture of her holding up part of the ray wind target. So here we have farmers in Ohio and their children able to identify a weather balloon and a ray wind target, and yet we're supposed to believe that the intelligence officer and other high-ranking officers in Roswell in 1947 were unable to identify a weather balloon and a ray wind target, which is what was displayed in General Ramey's office.
Well, you know what doesn't make sense? Why would they had all those troops, hand to hand, shoulder to shoulder, looking for debris if it was a weather balloon?
Well, the idea is that, trying to foster on this was a highly classified project. And because it was highly classified, they had to clean up all the debris. What they don't tell you is the highly classified part was the purpose, not the equipment. The equipment was off the shelf, weather balloons and ray wind targets. There would be no reason for any kind of manufactured excuse, no reason to have all these soldiers involved in cleaning up the debris and all of these things that transpired. We talked to people, and again, it's Tom Schmidt. Well, yeah, why not? Don Schmidt, Tom Carey, and I talked to lots of people who handled debris, talked about how they packaged it to be shipped out of Roswell. We talked to people who saw the bodies. We talked to people who were involved in part of that. whole recovery operation. And why would all of these people be telling this story, especially back in 1989 and 1990 when Don and I began the investigation? There was no incentive to talk about this to get yourself on TV. That came much later. And we've exposed any number of people who have claimed to have been involved in the Roswell recovery in some fashion as not having been in Roswell, or their stories don't make sense, or they've got the facts wrong. We've tried to limit what we've published, and we've made mistakes, but we tried to limit what we published to that information that we could corroborate from other sources. So I think the story that we've been able to develop based on our interviews, our search of documentation, our FOIA requests, all of that, I think we've been able to put together a story. And as I say, we have been unable to find a terrestrial explanation for it. Doesn't mean there isn't a terrestrial explanation somewhere. We haven't found it. And I would think in 1995, when the Air Force investigated the Roswell case and had access to all the classified records, had it been some kind of a classified project that required that sort of Herculean attempt to keep it under wraps, would have found that information and would have exposed it, because what possibly could it have been in 1947 that was classified that we needed to protect in 1995? The development of some kind of technologies used in the fighters or aircraft or something like that, that's all been exposed. We know all of that stuff now because it's obsolete and unimportant. What we're developing today, yes, that will be classified until that information is compromised in some fashion and they move on to the next generation of the research. But there's no reason to keep any of this classified information from 1947 secret. And they could have ended the whole discussion by giving us an explanation that made sense, rather than suggesting, well, the people who saw bodies saw these anthropomorphic dummies that were being used to test ejection systems of aircraft in the 1950s, and they were confused in their minds when they saw this sort of thing. And
yeah, but Kevin, but think about it.
Yes. Why
Why would the base call up the funeral home and ask if they had child-sized coffins?
I'm a little bit skeptical of that story, simply because why would you need a child-sized coffin? Even if the creatures are child-sized, you can put them in regular coffins as long as it can be hermetically sealed. That's the important point. You wouldn't have to get a child-sized coffin. Just bring us coffins.
Yeah, but don't forget the mindset of 1947 versus now, 2000 going on 25. I mean, people didn't probably think as logical in situations like that. I mean, let's face it, if you have alien bodies, I mean...
The problem was they did not have child-sized coffins in Roswell at that time that could be hermetically sealed. They had to get them from Amarillo.
Right.
So that opens up another avenue for compromise of what you're doing. All I'm saying is we need coffins coffins that can be hermetically sealed. There were stories going around that they got a lot of dry ice to help preserve the bodies. Don and I actually went to a couple of the ice houses in Roswell in the 1990s that their history went back into the 1920s, and we were looking for records of something like that. We're unable to find that. The records actually were missing, and I don't think there was anything nefarious of it. It was just that they no longer kept them. But we looked at all those sorts of stories about that. So would they need coffins that are hermetically sealed? Sure. Did they have to be child-sized? No. They could use any coffin available to them. We talked to people that were involved in the flights that took the bodies out of Roswell. So we know that sort of thing happened. Walter Hott, who spent literally decades telling us, Tom, Don, and me, that his only involvement was to write the press release that went out over the news wires that day, July 8th, 1947. But he later on, around 2000, 2001, talking to other investigators, a French company was coming to film him, and he talked about having seen the bodies. And then I think Dennis Balsheiser and Wendy Connor interviewed him, and he talked about that again, and I'm thinking this bothers me because, here's a complete change in his story. But I interviewed a guy named Harris, a Lieutenant Harris. He was a financial officer. I interviewed him in the 1996, 1997 time frame. And he was telling me that he was in the hangar where the bodies were stored, and Walter Haut was there, and he said, "You want to see the alien bodies? They're in this room." And Harris told me that he put his hand on the doorknob and decided he didn't want to see them, so he didn't open the door. The important point is Harris was telling me that Haut was involved with some way in getting the bodies out of Roswell type thing. He was directly involved in that sort of thing. Harris was telling me that story before Walter Haut would even admit it. So I think that's pretty impressive corroboration for that sort of thing. So we know there were bodies. We have to look at the stories. And like I say, over time, it may be that the morticians added the idea of it needed to be a child-sized coffin as a real one. Lydia Sleppy, who was a teletype operator, a radio secretary in Albuquerque at the time. One of the radio station's parent company was in Albuquerque, and Johnny McBoyle was in Roswell on the phone to Lydia Sleppy telling her about what he had seen. And it was in she was putting it over the news wire, and it was interrupted by "do not transmit, stop transmitting immediately." Well, the skeptics say, yeah, there was no mechanism for them to interrupt her transmission. And if you read her affidavit, she said if there was an incoming message, there was a bell that would go off, and we would flip a switch so we could get the incoming transmission. So yeah, she could have interrupted the transmission. The point is, later on, she talked about how it was the FBI. Well, in her original story, which was published in a magazine in 1976, before Roswell became a big deal, was telling the story about how this transmission had been interrupted, but didn't mention the FBI. It was later on she talked about the FBI. So there was something that you might say she confabulated over the years from whatever source. It was the FBI who interrupted the transmission. But the real point, it was interrupted. And the secondary point is sometimes these stories evolve a little bit, and you have to take a look at what exactly was said originally closer to the event to get at the proper truth.
Well, that's what we're going to dig on here a little bit more tonight with Kevin. We'll be back right after the news break with Kevin. You're listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio. Check out our website. It's going to be updated this weekend at www.nightdreamstalkradio.com. Well, here's Guy Ticker with the news.
Diving into the headlines of the mysterious and unexplained, this is The Unseen News with Guy Ticker, where the extraordinary is just the beginning. More UFOs. Several pilots reported seeing 3 or 4 UFOs in the sky over western Oregon, flying at different altitudes just a few weeks ago. This according to a report from KPTV. The pilots reported seeing strange red circular lights zipping around at night. And as the outlet also reported, a United Airlines pilot contacted the control tower to talk about moving lights seen where? That's right, over western Oregon. And that wraps up tonight's top news stories. This is Guy Ticker on the Night Dreams Talk Radio Network. The ultimate ride into the unknown with Gary Anderson's Night Dreams Talk Radio. Hosted by the legendary voice of alternative talk radio, Gary Anderson himself. This is where the best guests and the biggest mysteries come alive. From UAPs and Bigfoot to earth-shaking changes and mind-bending time travel, we've got it all. Brace yourself, because when night falls, Night Dreams Talk Radio takes you to the edge and beyond.
You're listening to my friend Gary Anderson on Night Dreams Talk Radio, the best in paranormal radio.
Well, thank you, John. We're back with Kevin Randall. And, again, not just that, they were also reported that these bodies were stored in a hangar. I mean, again, if you listen to what was going through Congress, I mean, I think what we need to do is seriously do more research on Roswell. Because if we want proof that these things really exist, there is our proof right there.
Roswell is the key to understanding this. The problem we're running into in today's environment is we have quite a few people talking about other UFO crashes around the country. And I often say that I'm the leading expert on UFO crashes in the world today. I think of Ryan Wood. He's probably the leading expert in the world about worldwide crashes. Give him a nod on his book. I forget the name of his book that lists the UFO crashes. The problem I have is, I want to explain this as simply as possible, and yet I want to make sure everybody has enough information to understand exactly where I'm going with this. But the point here is we have. I did a book, Crash When UFOs Fall from the Sky. The problem is there's 118 listed crashes in there, I think. The vast majority of them are misidentifications, are single witness, are hoaxes, are mistakes. And we need to separate all of that nonsense from the few true cases that are out there. Roswell being one of them. Shag Harbor, I think, of more not really as a crash, but an emergency landing, because the craft went into Shag Harbor, went to the bottom of the harbor, and eventually made its way out into the ocean and disappeared. But there's a couple of very good instances where these things have happened. Then there's landing traces where, of course, the UFOs touched down and left traces behind and then taken off. So there's good, solid evidence. That's the other problem we have, is they say, well, where's the physical evidence? And I'm thinking, what do you want? We can produce that kind of evidence, and yet the skeptical community, and the debunking community, I probably should say, and the government has done a very good job of concealing that information by throwing mud upon it. Project Blue Book looked at just over 12,000 sightings, for example. They claim only 701 were unresolved, unidentified. But I did a random survey of those 12,000 cases. I think that 4,000 to 5,000 cases were labeled as insufficient data for a scientific analysis. That's no solution. That's an unidentified case. Some of the cases had plenty of information attached to them, so had they wanted to do the proper analysis, they could have done so. They just didn't bother to do it. Now it's too late to do some of that analysis. I talked about a case in, I think it was Austin, Texas, in 1967 or 68, just before Project Blue Book closed down, and a guy had seen the object in the sky when he was out walking his dog about 3 o'clock in the morning, and the Air Force investigated, and they labeled his case as insufficient data for scientific analysis, and the guy complained. What information was not provided? He filled out the form. He was interviewed by an Air Force lieutenant at length. They provided a very detailed report. He says, what's missing from this? What more information did you need that we did not gather at the time? And they finally changed the explanation to, or the non-explanation to unidentified. The point simply is we've got probably nearly half of the cases reported to Blue Book that have no explanation. They just have a label attached to them.
Well, now you can correct me because I could be 100% wrong, but for all the research, and I've been doing this a long time too, is, Project Blue Book wasn't really to show proof that they existed. It was kind of to debunk it, if I'm correct.
There were short periods when the official Air Force investigation, I'm thinking of Project Sign when it began, and then when the name was changed to Project Blue Book, again, there was an attempt to gather the information properly, interview the witnesses properly, and draw conclusions properly, but those were short-lived. In the interim between Sign and the beginning of Blue Book, there became a point where they didn't care, and they laughed about the UFO sightings until some general got involved in what's going on with the UFO investigation or the flying saucer investigation. And they had to change their tune. And then Ed Ruppelt came in as a leader of Project Blue Book. Actually, it was Project Grudge before, but evolved into Blue Book. And he did a legitimate investigation, but his tour of duty ended. They brought in more people. And it seemed that the commanders or the project officers for Project Blue Book, the officers in charge, had a very debunking anti-UFO attitude. So they weren't looking at it scientifically. I read a case from Florida just before Blue Book closed, and the major who was investigating the case was annoyed having to waste his time with this nonsense. And so I'm a young airman standing in front of this major, and I'm trying to explain how I'd seen this UFO, and the major's attitude suggests to me that maybe my best course of action is to just kind of forget what I had seen. And I can look at Project Blue Book files where the original report suggested something anomalous, and later on the witnesses kind of changed his mind. The military witnesses changed his mind simply because of pressure put on by his superiors, not wanting to deal with this sort of thing. And there's a lot of cases like that we can look at in Blue Book as well, which is not to say there aren't some very competent investigations that have been done, and some solutions are obviously correct. But for the most part, the attitude of Blue Book, as you mentioned, was not to really investigate the cases, but to debunk them.
And that is a shame, too. Again, that was thrown up here, too, with Congress, too. And that's just it. When they bring the people in from the CIA, the Pentagon, and all these different groups from the Pentagon, what they're trying to do is debunk it. Now, I'll be honest with you. I have known a couple people that, who claim that they saw stuff. And like anything, ufology is really one of the worst of people trying to get fame on it. You know that.
Whenever there's a big wave of sightings, for example, there's always the hoaxers that come in or the tricksters that come in to try to generate some interest in what's going on. So you're absolutely correct. There are people who are looking for their 15 minutes of fame. The power of the spotlight is a great draw for these people to talk about their stories. And you have to look at that carefully and see if the stories make any sense. If it's single witness, for example, and it lasted less than a minute, I'm really not interested in that case because A, it's single witness, and B, if you don't have an opportunity of at least a minute to observe it, you're probably not going to know exactly what you'd seen, and your mind fills things in. I had walked out of my house one day at dark, and I looked up and I could swear I was looking at a domed disc silently flying through the sky, and all of a sudden it turned and the jet engine roar hit me, and I realized it was an airplane. It was a configuration of the lights on the airplane, the way the airplane was turning, that gave the impression at night that it was a domed disc. And I think if I'd only seen that for 4 or 5 seconds, I would have thought I'd seen a domed disc, but I was able to observe it long enough for it to resolve itself. So we got to look at all those sorts of things when we're gathering our information.
I think I've told you before, I had a friend years ago who was a vice president of Republic Airlines. And when he was in the Air Force back in Vietnam days, coming back after he dropped his load, he was coming back, I think, to Guam or whatever it was. And he told me that he looked off of his window and there was a UFO off his wing. And everybody on his crew members all saw it. And the co-pilot advised him not to get on the horn and say anything. He did. And he was instructed when he landed to not depart out of the plane, none of the crew to depart. They surrounded the B-52, and they took all the crew members to separate rooms, and a couple hours later guys in suits were interrogating him. And he was told, either to drop it, because he wanted to make brigadier general before he retired. And he was told either to drop it or he should resign out of the Air Force. And that's what he did.
There's any number of stories like that. There was it relates back to the Condon Committee, the University of Colorado study in the late 1960s. There was a case that they labeled as a natural phenomenon so rare it had never been seen before or since. And I was looking at that case because I wanted more information, and it was a British overseas airline that the pilots had seen a UFO, and that was reported as well. And it's the same sort of thing. They were taken by their superiors, by men in suits, away to be interrogated about what they had seen and then not to talk about it anymore. But I found it interesting because the Condon Committee investigated it, and their explanation for the sighting was a natural phenomena that had never been seen before or since. And I'm thinking that one of their conclusions was there was nothing of a scientific value to continue the research into UFOs. And I'm thinking, here's a case that kind of contradicts that. We now got a new natural phenomena that had caused some trouble. Maybe we should do some research in that and see if we can figure out what this natural phenomenon is. But the real point is it was a UFO sighting that the guys had seen, and they suffered the same fate. And then there's the Japanese pilot, the JAL 1628, reported a UFO and lost his job as a pilot because he reported a UFO. He later got it back with the help of some Americans who were helping him out. But the point is, there was a very, very sharp stigma for reporting UFOs. And that prevailed through the Air Force and into the airlines and that sort of thing. You didn't want to be caught reporting a UFO because you would soon find yourself out of a job.
Oh, yeah, that's the scary part right there. You hit it on the nail. So we got a call. Who do we have out there?
This is Tom.
Hi, Tom. You got a question for our guest?
Yes, I do. As a officer in the service, and as someone who has a great deal of information on the UFO phenomenon, how were you treated when you brought this up to any of your peers or superiors?
That's a very interesting question. I don't think I've ever been asked that. When I was commissioned and moved into intelligence, of course, there were all the background investigations because I needed a top secret clearance. And they knew, I think it was the OSI doing the investigation, actually knew of my history of writing articles about UFOs, which were not very complimentary to the Air Force. And they had copies of the articles in my file. I know this because the guy doing the background investigation lived across the street from my father, and they talked about this sort of thing. When I got to Richards Bauer Air Force Base, they knew of my interest in UFOs, and the officer who was taking me around and introducing me to stuff was asking me about the UFO things. I got my security clearance. It never caused me any trouble. Everybody basically knew of my interest in UFOs. By the time I got to the Army National Guard and into Iraq, still as an intelligence officer, still with these security clearances, the soldiers would come up and ask me questions about the UFOs. It just never really inhibited my career at all. I didn't have any problems. The only thing that happened, which was kind of funny, is as I was moving into the Guard, the battalion commander came up to me and says, "Why are your records housed by the National Security Agency?" And I said, "I have no clue." Later on, I figured out because I was involved in intelligence, and I think the intelligence officers' records are separated from the normal flow of military records because of the sensitive nature of the jobs that we were doing. But it really never caused me any trouble as near as I could tell.
Do you have another question, Tom?
Well, no, I'm just happy to hear that he didn't have the problems that I know others that have been in the military have had by saying what they had seen. And I'm really happy for your guest.
Well, I think the difference is I wasn't talking about what I had seen, but I was talking about my experience as an investigator and writing about the UFOs from the point of view of somebody who was gathering the information like a reporter would do for a magazine or a newspaper, as opposed to being an observer of the UFO. And that might be the difference there. That my credibility hinged on the fact that I was talking to other people as opposed to me seeing something myself. That might be the difference.
Okay. Again, well, I want to thank you, Tom. What do you think about all this stuff, with disclosure? They keep saying, certain people keep saying, I tell you, it's really getting interesting out there. Everything from a false flag to being set up for alien invasion to this, to that. I mean, it's really getting confusing out there. What's your take on this?
I had thought when Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal published their article in 2017, about UFOs, and they were quoting Navy pilots and that sort of thing. And then Lou Alexandro releasing those footages of UFOs. I thought we were moving toward disclosure, but here we are nearly 8 years down the road, and I don't think we're any closer than we were. We've seen the Congress demand investigations, and those who are charged with the conducting of those investigations are able to dodge the questions. The first report that was required by the government, I think, is a C- high school paper, as opposed to anything that you would expect from a government agency. And they bring in the people, and it's always the attitude, well, we haven't found any aliens yet. We don't see any aliens. Well, we've done these investigations, but there's no aliens involved. It's the same thing. I think of it as like Twining 2.0, General Twining being the officer back in the 1940s who established some of the investigations. But we're at the same point we are there, where they're denying everything. It doesn't matter what we present in the way of evidence. They deny it. They argue about it. They cause all kinds of roadblocks to be thrown up so we can't get to the truth. And that's where we are. We're dealing with people who clearly don't accept the idea of alien visitation. We're dealing with people who don't look at the evidence. I sat through one of the congressional investigations a number of years ago because they were all online, is where I was watching these things. And I remember they had two fellows from the Pentagon over there talking about UFOs and what they'd seen. One of the congressmen actually asked about the Malmstrom Air Force Base events where the UFO supposedly shut down 10 missiles in a ballistic missile flight. And the two spokesmen from the Pentagon actually lied about it. So well, we haven't heard about that. We don't know anything about it. Later on in the conversation, it became clear that one of the guys did know something about it. He said, but it wasn't alien. It wasn't anything involved. I mean, here's a matter of national security. You're not supposed to be able to shut down the missile flights from outside the command modules, and yet that was done. And that if that had gotten out, it tells our competitors, well, there's a way of doing it if you can figure it out. We didn't want that information out. And I think that is a important point for national security. But the real point is the guys who were supposedly the insiders on this were denying any knowledge, and then later on one of them said something that indicated he knew much more about it than he was letting on. So we have that sort of thing going on, but I don't think we're moving toward disclosure. They're able to stop the investigation. I think when a president goes to him and goes to it like the director of Central Intelligence, and he says, Mr. Director, I would like everything you have on UFOs. And the director says, well, the problem, Mr. President, there's various agencies involved. I'll need to gather that information to make a comprehensive report, and we'll get back to you on that. And somehow they never get the report completed, and the president doesn't know. And the next thing you know, he's no longer the president, and somebody else is coming in. And the new president's priorities may not be learning what UFOs are. So they're able to dodge the bullets that way. But I just don't see anything in what's been going on. And I watched the congressional hearing that Representative Nancy Mace had a couple of weeks ago, and it was sort of the same sort of thing. We weren't really getting anything new and different, and it really didn't go anywhere. Some of the questions weren't answered because they claimed national security. The reporter who was involved claimed that he didn't want to reveal the sources. And I understand that. I mean, understanding, not wanting to reveal his sources. But if he doesn't reveal the sources, then what kind of credibility and weight can I give to that information? I don't know who it is. I don't know what his background is. I don't know how he came to see that information. So we're getting nowhere. It looks good, I guess, to the general public, but when you're sitting in the UFO seat, if you will, it just really doesn't do much for me. And I don't think we're moving any closer to disclosure.
I agree with you. I think we got another caller. Caller, who do we have?
Hi, this is Barb.
Hi, Barb. You got a question for our guest?
Yeah, I also wanted to say to you, I'm so happy that you're recovering, and I hope you continue to get better completely.
I'm trying. Now, your question for Kevin.
Well, I was wondering if he had ever heard any claims or investigated any claims of there being any alien bodies or a survivor at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio.
Okay, he'll give you the answer offline.
Well, the story is the information we have is from the bodies recovered at Roswell went to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Wright Field at the time. One of the bodies then went to Lowry Air Force Base because the Army's mortuary service was there. And at the time of the Roswell crash, it was the Army Air Forces as opposed to the U.S. Air Force. They hadn't broken off into a separate service at the time. We have heard that one of the creatures may have survived in Roswell. There's a couple of witnesses who talked about one of them walking into the hospital there at Roswell. And it's from a couple of people who would have been in a position to see that had it happened. And there's been discussion of one or two bodies, one or two of the creatures surviving the crash. But the information is that the survivor didn't go to Wright-Patterson, Wright Field. It went somewhere else. And then it passed in 1952, I think. That information is rather nebulous, and I'm not sure about how accurate it is. We've talked to people who provided that information, but I haven't vetted it to the point where I'm satisfied that we can say, yeah, that really happened that way. It may well have happened that way, but we just don't have enough information to underscore the credibility of that story. So we have stories of bodies, we have stories of one of them surviving, but we have to look at those a little bit skeptically, simply because that group of people who were involved in that kind of aspect of the Roswell case is much more narrow than those who were involved in the retrieval of the materials, the metal, that, because you can say, well, metal is metal, and what does that prove? But an alien body, that's a different kettle of fish.
It is. Now, hey, Kevin, our time is up. It went by so fast here tonight with you. Do you want to share your latest book and a website or whatever you want to share? Please do.
Well, the latest book is called 1973, and it's an outgrowth of my discussions with Calvin Parker. And of course, Calvin Parker and Charles Hickson were abducted in 1973, and it is the look at that sort of thing. And talking to Calvin Parker, for example, he said that there were witnesses to the abduction that came forward right at that time. And I just didn't know of anybody. And I found a document, actually they sent me the document of an Air Force investigation the day after the abduction that listed additional witnesses to that abduction. So it deals with what was going on in 1973 and how all that related. I've done a book called Roswell in the 21st Century. It gives you a good look at the Roswell case. And then I've done a book, Understanding Roswell, provides more information about that. One of the books I really like is Leveland, which deals with the electromagnetic effects that were taking place in November of 1957. My blog is www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com, and you type in a keyword, there's a search engine on it, and it'll take you to all the articles I've done on that specific area if I've done anything like that. So that's kind of where, I was on the Netflix special on Roswell, the Unsolved Mysteries that they did, just dropped in October, but it's still available on Netflix. You can see Don Schmidt and me talking about the Roswell case, and even Colonel Richard Weaver, who was the Air Force officer that investigated the Roswell for the Air Force in the mid-1990s. I think it's an interesting documentary.
It is. I watched it here last week. Well, hey, Kevin, I want you to have a great weekend that's coming up. And again, I want to thank you for coming on.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and I wish you well on your recovery.
Okay, my friend, you take care.
You too. Thank you.
Bye. Well, we're going to be back with, JC, who's our next guest?
Our next guest is Andrew Ba-shogo, the time-traveling lawyer.
Yeah, and he also went to Mars, too, I hear.
Yes, he did. Went to Mars.
In that special elevator, went up, and there he was.
Yep. There was two places, I believe. So, well, we'll let him talk about when he gets here.
Yeah, you're not feeling good. I'm not feeling good. Hey, we're making a good team here.
we're a bang-up crew. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to be right back with Andrew, and we're going to talk about time travel. So don't go away. And the last 20 minutes with Andrew, we're going to open up the lines, and you can even ask Andrew some questions. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
I was a fool to ever leave your side. Me minus you is such a lonely ride. The breakup we had made me lonesome and sad. I realize I love you 'cause I want you back. Hey, I spent the evening with the radio. Regret the moment that I let you go. Our quarrel was such, the way I love you so much. I know now that I love you 'cause I need your touch. Hey, reunited and it feels so good. Reunited 'cause we understood. There's one perfect feeling, darling, this one is it. We both are so excited 'cause we're reunited. Hey, I sat here staring at the same old wall. Came back to life just when I got your call. I wished I could climb right through the telephone line and give you lots of love so you would still be mine. Hey, can't go on cheating, honey, I'll get blamed. I find it very hard to stay away as we reminisce a perfect moment like this.
Take a journey of adventure and discovery for the enigmatic giants of the forests. Read On the Trail of Bigfoot by Mike Dupler. The author himself describes it this way.
Having found possible Sasquatch evidence, namely trees driven into the ground upside down, thought to be territory markers, led me to investigate this creature in my native Ohio. Several years and many forays into Bigfoot territory, I have found incredible evidence, which inspired my book, On the Trail of Bigfoot. Bigfoot is alive and has many fantastic abilities. The evidence is out there for all to see, but you need to know what to look for. My book will inspire those who have answered the call to seek this elusive creature, the Bigfoot. The truth is out there.
Read On the Trail of Bigfoot by Mike Dupler. Available now at Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and IndieBound.org. From the shadowy depths of the unknown to the farthest reaches of the cosmos, this is Night Dreams Talk Radio. Join legendary host Gary Anderson, a titan of alternative talk radio with over 54 years of experience, as we dive deep into the mysteries of UFOs, Bigfoot, Earth changes, time travel, and the unexplained. Featuring top guests, electrifying interviews, and the best bumper music from the 70s, 80s, and beyond. Your next adventure begins here. Tune in every Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific on YouTube, iHeart, and all major platforms. Night Dreams Talk Radio, where the night comes alive.
Hi, this is Val Von Torn of Metatron Power and Light. You're listening to Gary Anderson and Night Dreams Talk Radio.
And we are back. Just think about all those bodies, alien bodies. Where did they ever end up? JC, think about that from Roswell.
She was at the right pat one time, and I thought about it, but that is so guarded, you're not getting nowhere near it. But yeah, listen, those bodies and all those pieces, parts, they're sitting somewhere.
Yeah, again, I just am so shocked about how people are so absorbed about these drones. I mean, so many of these people, podcasters made the claim that we're being invaded by. How can you live that down?
I can assure you that is not aliens invade. Aliens wouldn't have to invade us. I'm pretty sure they could just
Amazon, Walmart.
Real, yeah. That was the funniest when the politician there said, "Well, we're not shooting them down because it could be Amazon or FedEx. We don't want to do that."
Well, how about the poor guy who shot one down and is going to be sued by Walmart?
Yeah, since when do the politicians take so much care into the FedEx delivery?
I mean, if the aliens are so far advanced, right?
Yeah.
Why would they need drones?
Why would they even need to invade us? They flick a proverbial switch and we'd be gone.
Yeah, maybe they're stealing bodies and replacing them. I keep thinking of that movie, the two of them, the Invasion of the Body Snatcher, the original and the remake of it.
There's two remakes. They remade that thing twice.
Yeah, that's what I just said. The original and the last one.
There's one between.
So maybe it's three. I don't know, but I only know of the two.
Oh no, they did it in the 70s and the 90s too. One was
Donald was in the 60s, late 60s.
Yeah, I think it was something like the 70s maybe.
No, it was the 60s. I'm looking right at it right now. Anyway, our next guest. What can you say about him?
Well, our next guest is Andrew Ba-shogo. Now, Andrew is a lawyer, a writer, public speaker, media personality, and a former presidential candidate, best known for serving as a US Crononaut and Project Pegasus during the advent of time travel and Project Mars during the advent of interdimensional travel.
Well, Andrew, it's been a while. How have you been doing?
Very well, but you talk about the drones in New Jersey. I was born in Morristown, New Jersey, and I had alien contact throughout my childhood, so I'm taking it a little bit personally with these drones flying over the Garden State, but it'll be interesting to find out what they really are.
Well, it's not there. They're now been reported because people looking in the sky, Andrew, have realized that these drones are all over. My son and his spouse went out on our porch here, 2 weeks ago and got pictures of drones. Not just that, it's in Nevada, it's in Arizona, it's in California, Oregon, all across the country. Now people are looking up the sky and they see these drones, and then a lot of people think, oh my God, we're going to be invaded.
Yeah, it's kind of getting a universal exposure to what's in our universe.
Yeah, well, maybe
most appropriate.
Yeah, well, with Amazon and Walmart and who else knows, right? Napa Auto Parts using drones to send stuff back and forth to the warehouse. But people overreact.
Yeah, I think we have to remember that the drones have been permitted to fly around in our skies.
They are, and
not drones from outer space, but drones from our planet. Yeah.
Well, I can't.
Our country.
Do you see, honestly, Andrew, that ETs would use drones? I mean, with their technology, why would they need drones?
Well, I saw a huge UFO above Morris Plains, New Jersey in 1968. And the mystery for me as a contactee of major nature in childhood was, okay, I would see one in the sky, right? I saw a really huge one in the sky one time. But the ETs were often in my bedroom at night. So how do they get there? So I don't think they need drones to get from here to there in the cosmos, because I know they were coming in our house somehow without apparent means of getting inside,
Well, I agree
so I
with
don't
you.
think they need drones.
I don't. Now, getting on with time travel, again, I know that as a child, your father was, a scientist, and he somehow got drafted into a program, not just for time travel. You went to Mars and you done all this stuff. But how old were you when that happened?
Well, I first teleported between New Jersey and New Mexico so that my late father, Raymond Ba-shogo, and I could meet with Dr. Harold M. Agnew when I was 6. So that was, let's say, winter of 1968, because, of course, I was September born. Now, Agnew was part of every major part of the Manhattan Project, and that's something we've kind of missed about time travel. The government sort of paraded the fact that they developed the bombs that they dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan, but the very same scientists, like Dr. Harold Agnew and Edward Teller and Sterling Colgate and Dr. Robert Beckwith, and real top physicists of that generation, pretty much concealed the fact that they had developed what I refer to as the 8 modalities of time travel, 8 different ways of getting from here to elsewhere in a new and revolutionary way.
Can you tell us what some of them are?
Well, I think it's important to connect the development of time travel to all of the stuff that was done with remote viewing. I like to say, regarding the kids involved, that we were small mediums at large. And then, of course, another sort of more practical form of time travel was spinning to induce out-of-body experiences. And I got to a certain point that I couldn't get beyond. And Dr. Stephanie Bindis, I believe her name was, who had been a nurse during the Korean conflict, said, yes, others are reporting that. We think it's the infrastructure propagating the hologram in which we find ourselves. We're calling it the Matrix. So this was 29 years before the Wachowski brothers ever wrote and did the Matrix movie with Keanu Reeves. So they were calling it the Matrix almost 30 years before then. And like a lot of the things going on in the defense technical community, they were dropping these things that seemed like science fiction into films and TV shows and making us think it was science fiction. But in fact, as I've made clear for the last 30 years or more, it was science fact. We were time traveling, and DARPA's Project Pegasus was the time travel program. And so the very individuals who had developed nuclear weapons were developing time travel devices, and I would go places in those devices. So those are 2 of the really simple ones. Then, of course, there was the Montauk chair, where you went to like a 20 or 30 moment in your own subjective future. There was Tesla teleportation, where you would go through a vortal tunnel in time-space. And, of course, there was chronovision. The chronovisors had been developed by the Vatican musicologists Pellegrino Ernetti and Augustina Gemelli when they were studying Gregorian chants. And they made a slight change to a device to listen to the chants, and something that Gemelli's father had said to him in childhood came through the device when he called him my little zucchini, of course, that Italian vegetable. And they realized, my God, we have a window to the past. So they got with Enrico Fermi, and by 1952, they had essentially a form of television of past events. And then ultimately we went forward in time with the chronovisor. But there were a number of others as well. But the two basic ones were the teleporter and the chronovisor. That was the essential gist of where they were going.
Now, the chronovisor, didn't the Catholic Church experiment with that too?
Well, that was actually where it came from. They Ernetti and Gemelli were Vatican musicologists working in the Catholic University of Milan, and it was discovered by Vatican scientists, passed on to the U.S. Navy, and from there DARPA, and from there Bell Labs in New Jersey, which is only about 15 minutes away from my house, Murray Hill. And so they placed the chronovisor in Bell Labs in Murray Hill. And so my dad and I only had to go around the corner to find a chronovisor and travel in it.
Now, again, you were a young boy when all this was taking place, and your dad got you in, and you were recruited. Weren't you, from your dad's bosses and your father? Did you ever have any resentment, growing up at an older age, of what all you went through?
Not really. I mean, I'm asked that often, and the way I describe it is I felt like I was a yo-yo on the end of a string. So I knew we were doing something new. I knew it was unprecedented. And as my dad explained one time, I was going to get an opportunity to do and see things that people would not probably in their entire life. So just do the best that I could. But it was actually very exciting. And I'm very proud and happy that my dad had faith in me as his son and as a member of our proud Polish-American family. It's kind of interesting that I have a bit of a connection with newly elected, for the second time, President Trump, because just as my dad was involved and brought me in, his uncle was one of the two War Department officials who beat the two FBI agents to seize Nikola Tesla's paperwork. And I visited that paperwork at the Los Alamos National Labs. It was in a special library that you could only access with a special card that gave you access to that library. So I think that Troy Anderson's book, The Trump Code, is probably worth people taking a look at, because I really think that there is a Trumpian connection to Project Pegasus and the people who worked on it. I hope to speak to the president one day about, his uncle and my dad's, roots in the program, how it all fell together. But it was really the function of the Manhattan Project physicists.
Now, do you think, too, that going back and doing what you did in time, like when you went back to like Lincoln or Washington, or when you went even to Mars, could that have changed our timeline at all? Not just you, all the other kids and other people that are involved in all these projects.
No, see, that's a frequent misunderstanding that science fiction has given time travel. The point I definitely would like to make tonight, I was thinking about this. When we time travel, we go back to the original event. Science fiction has made us think that it's a second sort of replaying of the event, but that's not true. We don't change the past by going to it or going forward to it. We're essentially fulfilling it. Because, for example, the reason they sent me to go advise General George Washington in August of 1776 to retreat his troops from New York Harbor, which he listened to me and actually did, was because they used chronovision to see me doing it. And they thought, my God, Ray's son is back in Washington's time, and he's telling General Washington, not yet President Washington, to retreat his troops from New York Harbor. We better send Andy because we don't know what will happen if we don't. So I didn't go to a second replaying of the event. I was sent to the original event, and the paradox was I was in the event, and that's why they did so. So there are some paradoxical formulations in time travel as it emerged. But that's the common error that people keep on making when they can't understand. They keep on saying, well, you must have been able to change the future by altering the past. No, I didn't alter the past. I fulfilled it. I did what they saw me doing, and then Washington did what history recorded. He retreated his troops from New York Harbor.
Yeah, but Andrew, could you have been maybe to a parallel, planet? I mean, another parallel world. In other words, not going...
That would have been possible. Well, sure. I mean, I don't have, unlike, Pasadena, California, or, Seattle, Washington, there was nothing on any sign or anything said you're entering the planet Mars. There was one that said, "Welcome to Mars." But no, I think, honesty compels me to say nobody in the Mars program knew it was the actual Mars. It also may have been Mars from the distant past. I've kind of made my peace with Elon Musk in that sense. That's probably what it was, because, look, we were getting to Mars via aeronautical repositioning chamber, where an elevator would essentially morph from a typical box-like elevator into a kind of a round, more of like a water tunnel type apparatus, and get to the red planet in 8 to 20 minutes, depending on how close or far away Mars was from Earth.
Now,
how they were doing that so quickly, I don't know.
Okay, now you were being transported that way. Did they ever lose any people doing that?
Well, we lost several people. I witnessed their attacks by predators, but we didn't lose any in the aeronautical repositioning chamber. And that was the brilliant work of Howard Robart Hughes. In fact, I met Hughes at 999 North Sepulveda after I saved my colleague Bernie Mendez, who was a friend of both Richard Nixon and Howard Hughes. And he wanted to meet me because of my exploit of saving Bernie. I carried him on my back for about a mile or two when he collapsed, probably from hypoxia or oxygen deprivation, which we all experienced, along with the tunnel vision and all of the effects of that on Mars. But we did lose a few people from predator attacks. There were both reptoids and insectivoid predators on Mars. I want to meet with Elon Musk in addition to President Trump, because he needs to know that Mars is a pretty scary place and not a light assignment. And a few fellow astronauts were, killed by predators on the surface.
Yeah, and that, again, too, depending on who you talk to, they say that there's no atmosphere on Mars. But then I've talked to other scientists that, yes, there is some oxygen on Mars, not enough to, where you could breathe for very long. But, I mean, what was it like?
Well, there is oxygen on Mars. There's also water. There's usually sort of baby blue skies, because oxygen is a clear gas that refracts blue. So the very blue skies, or light blue skies of Mars, essentially established that there's oxygen there. I was not a huge athlete. I was age 19, 20, 21, 22 when I was up there from 1981 to 84, about 20 times. But it has a breathable atmosphere. So we had hypoxia or oxygen deprivation, but we could breathe and explore the surface. And that was really our assignment, to pretty much just to explore the surface. And as Major Ed Dames said one time during our training, I hope you all understand why we're sending you up there. Your job is to be seen and not eaten. And that got a good laugh from somebody over on my right, which was future President Barack Obama, then using his original Indonesian name, Barry Sotoro. So it was a remarkable group of young people. Regina Dugan, who President Obama would name the 19th and the first female director of DARPA, was in the program. I went up a couple times with Regina and Brett Stillings, whose dad was an operations analyst for Lockheed Skunk Works. My father, who was at the Ralph M. Parsons Company, just as he was with Pegasus. And I'm starting to really view the Mars program as kind of the last hurrah of Pegasus. It was like the last stage, because that was sort of my dad's focus, and even Bernie Mendez emphasized that fact.
Very interesting. Now, people want to know these creatures on Mars. And you mentioned, Ed Dames, which has been on our show numerous times, by the way, about being, eaten. Were they intelligent life forms or predators in such a way? Can you describe that a little bit more?
One, there were two inevitably lethal predators. If we got anywhere near them, we had been trained to sort of run around in a zigzag.
Okay, I just lost you. Andrew, are you still there? Yeah, hey, JC, we just lost him.
Yeah, that was weird. He was good, sounding good, and then we just couldn't hear him.
Yeah, it's all muffled.
Yeah, that's strange.
Yeah.
Right when we get in the good part about the insects.
Well, I tell you what, I'm going to hang up on him. Why don't you give him a call, and we'll try to, keep this going a little bit longer, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do that. Okay, we're going to be right back after this song. Maybe we can get Andrew back on. I'm curious what these creatures on Mars are really like. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Sweet Lord, my Lord, my Lord, I really want to see you, really want to be with you, really want to see you, Lord, but it takes so long, my Lord, my sweet Lord. My Lord, my Lord, I really want to know you, I really want to go with you, really want to show you love that it won't take long, my Lord, my sweet Lord, my Lord. My sweet Lord, I really want to see you, really want to see you, really want to see you, Lord, really want to see you, Lord, but it takes so long, my Lord, my sweet Lord, my Lord.
Coming to you live and covering all time zones like a glove. Here's Gary Anderson on Night Dreams Talk Radio.
I think we have Andrew back. Andrew, maybe your phone time traveled.
I think it did.
Now,
what I was saying, and
go ahead,
is that there were two inevitably lethal predators on Mars. One was a reptoid that had sort of like a chicken-like head, and one was an insectivoid that was like a garbage truck with 12 legs. If we got anywhere near them, we had to run around in a zigzag pattern to get away from them. And Brett Stillings and I were very lucky one time to run from one of the insectivoids. But two fellow astronauts were in my presence when they ended up, something called lunch for the reptoid type. So I want to meet Elon Musk to just advise him that Mars is not really a happy place to visit. Some of your astronauts might be devoured if they go without adequate technology to protect themselves.
I mean, did you guys have weapons to defend yourself when you were out there walking around?
Yeah, I had a kind of a photo flash gun that would just it had 3 settings, like heat, stun, and kill. And yet I was advised to not be too liberal in the use of that firearm because it might just antagonize the two inevitably lethal ones.
Now, were they intelligent?
More intelligent than our lizards. I mean, I really couldn't test their intelligence because I was just sort of standing there waiting to find out whether I was going to be devoured next. But they looked more intelligent than lizards on Earth.
Interesting. Was there any other intelligent life on Mars?
Yeah, there were 5 types of humanoids, especially the Homo martis terris, or Earthman on Mars, and the Homo martis martis, which is the Martian man on Mars. So there were descendants of the Earthlings who had gone to Mars in our prehistory, like the Egyptian, the Sumerian, and the Babylonian civilizations. And there were the original Martians, from which we kind of get our idea of what a Martian should look like. They were the original Martians. They had smaller, more spindly bodies. Some had antennae coming out of their foreheads. And they were the original ones that were up there when humans from Earth got up there. But we've been there. We were there in a number of major epochs of civilization.
Could Mars support, if something happened on our planet, could Mars support our civilization?
Not the whole thing, because it's 40% the size of Earth. So it would allow us to save some human beings there, but not everybody.
But if
as the Nibiru return would do so.
Yeah, but if you would say you were one of the lucky ones to go to Mars and be able to continue on your life, is it a place where you'd really want to be?
I would say no. It's not a happy place. It's got very little water. It's got deficient oxygen. It's got predators, and snakes litter the ground. It's a dangerous place. It makes the moon look like a cakewalk.
Now, were you ever?
I like to say, after Mars.
Go ahead.
I like to say after Mars, everything is cake, but that's just a little braggadocio. It's really quite a miserable place to visit.
How about the moon? That group you were in, did they transport any of you to the moon?
No, and that's one of the sort of untrue things about the literature of the secret space program. If anybody says they went to 3 places, like the moon, Mars, and Ceres or something, they're almost undoubtedly not telling the truth and making up their account, because it was the practice of DARPA to send an astronaut to just one planet or planetoid. So that's kind of become a standard litany for those claiming things that they didn't do, which is go into space at all. But no, we none of us went to the moon as well, or any other planetoid. It's all a one-shot deal because they want you to become an expert on that planet or planetoid.
How long were you on the Mars for?
For those 4 years, right, 81, 2, 3, and 4, I would go down from UCLA, where I was going to college, to 999 North Sepulveda in El Segundo, right past Los Angeles International Airport. And I would go up the elevator to the 5th floor of that building and check in and write my name and number. And I used my UCLA student ID number for my Mars mission number. And then I would go back into the elevator and we would go up to the 7th floor, and I would check in and get my photo flash gun, for example, because I was one of the astronauts who was trusted for good judgment and excellent shooting ability with a pistol. And I would then go back in the elevator and it would go up to the 9th floor, and then it would morph from a box-like elevator into a cylinder. And like anywhere from like 10 to 20 minutes later, we were on the surface of what they were telling us was Mars. Do I know it was? I don't really know. I mean, we were pretty much taking that on faith.
Were you in a building when you got to Mars? Was it underground or was it on top of the ground? What was it like? What was the base like?
Well, there were like 8 so-called jump rooms that we could arrive at, mostly in the equatorial region of Mars. So we didn't see very much of the polar region or the equatorial region. We really saw the middle latitudes. And so the weather was actually pretty nice. It was sort of like Los Angeles on a warm spring afternoon. So it was fairly pleasant in that sense, but there was deficient oxygen and also other symptoms of hypoxia, like tunnel vision. I don't think it damaged my vision. I think that was probably one of the chronovisors probably did that to my vision. Or, the practice of going to the past or future via chronovisor. Because we were told not to look up at the crystal array in the ceiling of that sort of 40-foot cube of holographic light in the chronovisors. That's where they were after Nadine Gemelli and Fermi made the television type chronovisors into more, Bell Labs made it more into sort of like a cube of light. But if we looked up at that crystal array, the 8-sided bismuth crystals that they were putting an electromagnetic signal through, we were told we would be blinded if we looked at that crystal array, and that one of the girls in the program had been totally blinded. I'm just legally, which just means I can't drive and read small print very well. And I can't drive at all, or shouldn't be. But I don't think that going to Mars damaged my health per se.
Now, you mentioned on Mars there were races of humanoids. How did they treat you? How did you treat them? Was there any relationships between you and them where you became friends, or even more?
Yes, in fact, there was. The 2 major humanoid species, the Homo martis terris and Martis, Earthman on Mars and Martian man on Mars, lived together cooperatively in underground layers with a lot of pneumatic tubing to make things run. And there was kind of a paisley design that they like to decorate their ceilings with. And Courtney Hunt of the CIA and I were greeted by a sort of a Marty Feldman-looking Homo martis, and he took us to his underground lair. But they lived cooperatively underground, and they invited to go to their residences. Now, the Homo martis sasquatchus looked like an ordinary Sasquatch. And then there was Homo martis de minimis, were like these little seven dwarf type, they looked almost like cartoon creatures that were about an inch tall. And we didn't really react or interact very much with them, but with the other two types, who were quite friendly to us. And I would go through what we call the dilapidated brick city, and near the what we called the corkscrew, which was one of the eight or nine jump rooms, and both the children of the Homo martis and the women would sort of look out at me through the abandoned doors and windows of the dilapidated brick city. So, but we had to watch them because we were told that they were cannibals, and I never saw any cannibalization of us by that type. But the predators were not humanoids. They were more lizard-like, and they were really dangerous. So they treated us pretty well up there. And in fact, when I met the Homo martis terrorists in New Jersey, like in summer of '70, one of them said to my father in perfect unaccented English, "Well, Ray, it's a pleasure to come to your beautiful planet again and meet you. Thank you for introducing us to your son, Andrew. I hope we can meet again next time we come to Earth." So there was a very civil interaction between us and the Martians.
So the Martians were coming and visiting Earth?
Yes, that was the Homo martis terrorists. They were visiting Earth, and they were humanoids. And those were the humanoids most like us because they were the descendants of the Earthlings who went to Mars in antiquity. And they were very civil. Two looked sort of like bald, muscular, Telly Savalas or Jesse Ventura type humanoids. And one looked like Larry Neal of the Three Stooges. He was sort of more intellectual and had a nappy head and looked like Larry of the Three Stooges, but they were very civil. They were humanoids, and they definitely wanted efficacious relations with we humanoids from Earth. But the predators were another matter altogether.
Now,
they viewed us as food.
When you were at Mars, so did you ever get attracted to the female Martians?
No, their women were rather pretty because they were the Homo martis and the female version of that humanoid species looked kind of like pretty Tibetan women, as did, for that matter, the kids looked like cute Tibetan kids. And the men really looked a little bit kind of weird, kind of Marty Feldman-esque. But their females were actually very pretty, sort of Asiatic-looking women. The problem is they had multiple appendages, not just two, but maybe four, sometimes six.
Well, so that would wear a guy weird out, I'll tell you that.
Well, I mean, they were good-looking people, at least in terms of the women and children. They had a kind of a cuteness to them. But the thing that was weird is they had too many arms. They had, often two, but many times four or even six. And that was a bit strange. But I had been told that they were cannibals, so I always kind of had my eye on them as I was walking through the dilapidated brick city. But they didn't really cannibalize anybody like I told they might. I guess because they're so short of food up there that sometimes they took part in cannibalism of us, we astronauts.
Well, if you really think about it, look at people who've been on, been on a ship where the ship went down, and they were on a life raft for weeks at a time, and they started, cannibalizing each other. So, I mean, I think we lost Andrew again, JC.
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, we lost him. But can you, JC, think about this? And again, Andrew, I'm sorry we lost you. But if you really think about this, a planet, would you want to go out on a planet And then there's a female species that have 4 to 6 arms. Could you imagine on a Friday when you get your paycheck? This hand comes out for the cash. This hand comes out for the cash. That hand comes out for the cash.
Yeah. Well, they're also, she might lure you under a web like a spider and eat you. But, she's got plenty of arms to, I don't know, hug you, reach around you, I guess. I don't know.
I don't know. It just makes me wonder, again, maybe we are the Martians.
What could be? Think about it. Why this is our native planet? Why do we get sunburn? That doesn't make sense.
You notice, well, as our planet is deteriorating, people are getting cancer now at record rates, skin cancer.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah, it's interesting. So what do you think in your area? Were you getting hit with people with these drones on the news in Ohio?
There's been only drone spotting in Ohio. Well, there was a couple around Akron and Canton, but I know there's a few around Dayton, but not much around my area. But, here's the thing. One of the theories is they're got a payload, so to speak. So who knows?
Yeah, I just can't see that they're ETs.
Oh, no, they're definitely not ETs. No.
Yeah. And that's probably why the government just didn't waste their time, They explained it was not a national threat. If anybody wants to call in, please give us a call. We're more than happy to talk to you. And I'm going to go ahead and put the number up. And we can talk about, did you have drones in your area? I know there's a group I just joined here recently that has been putting up a lot of interesting things on their Facebook page.
Yeah, listen, every podcast out there is talking about it for the last 2 weeks, even podcasts that specialize in nothing even relatively close to talking about drones or UFOs.
Well, here's the thing. Because that's what we talk about, a lot about UFOs. We talk about this type of subject quite a bit, and I've been doing it now 55 years, going on 56 years. A lot of these people, how can they keep... They're making all these claims on TikTok, on YouTube, and all this stuff, right? I'm talking some major people out there. It doesn't materialize. Eventually, why are people making claims with nothing to back it up?
Yeah, Lord knows a lot of people do that, but there's a lot of personal experiences like in any field, but it's the ones that really want to take it too far and just it's a lot.
Well, yeah, I'm listening to a lot of podcasts out there. I have proof that these drones are actually invading Earth. Yeah. I think we got a caller. Caller, who do we have?
You got Art here.
Hi, Art. How are you doing tonight?
Oh, okay. It's very interesting subject. Just real quickly, I met somebody, I think I've texted you about somebody I met that went underground at the base over here where they hold the ammunition. And, sometimes you want to think that, can I believe what somebody's telling me? But are there interdimensionals here underground in some of these bases? And it's a naval base depot where they hold weapons. That she was eerie to say that they're, eating people. So all of a sudden your guest speaker is talking about that, and it's just bringing a question to that. If I wanted to ask him that do we have some of these interdimensionals here, or whatever you want to call them, in some bases of our military, and are we feeding them? Because there's a lot of that going around, that we're missing people, the 411 and all that. Is that connected? So that would be my question.
Well, JC, jump in. Mary Joyce, a couple years ago on the show, talked about in her state, there is a underground huge base which they were expanding. But she said that they were these creatures, right, from off-world, that they were giving our military. Do you remember that technology? And in return, they were kind of like the military would turn their heads when it came down to like people disappearing, if you know what I mean.
Well, yeah, as a matter of fact, I had her on my show on your network about a year ago, and we talked about that. She calls them DUMBs. This is kind of the name for it, which stands for different things, underground military bases. But yes, in her area. Matter of fact, she talked to somebody that had worked inside one of these places. She met clandestinely in a restaurant, and she told her about all kinds of stuff. Yeah, they had a cryptid connection there. They were talking. They would look the other way. There was what they call the reptoids were going on there. There was people missing because there was a national forest there and underneath one of them mountains. There was a lot of stuff going on. It was all lined up, and she listen. Mary. She is a boots on the ground former reporter, like the old days, man. So she got in and talked to some people that secretly, because who knows what they had done to them if they'd have found out who they were.
Yeah, and then she was talking about they were eating. I think we also have Art still on, so don't hang up, Art.
Yes.
And I think we maybe have Andrew back. Andrew, are you back?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Andrew, I have Art here. It has a question to ask you. Art,
okay.
Here's Andrew.
Yeah. Yes, Andrew. Yes, I live near a base where they have where they keep the weapons for the shipyard, for the Navy shipyard, and there was a friend of mine that I just met, and she was telling me that she's an underwriter. She had to go there, and she met somebody from I think Chevron, maybe at the oil company or some executive, and took her down there because she has to give permission to give loans to monies to fix things up. But she said she went down there, and she says that there's interdimensionals, and they're eating people. And I was like, okay. And when she mentioned that, she mentioned also Camp Lejeune, where the military personnel were getting sick. And she says she had to go down there, and she said there were these tanks of water tanks or something like that, but they were full of bio from extraterrestrial. And so, just to give me some of this information that you guys are talking about, that there is something to do that, and Gary and I were just talking right now that is there anything that we are allowing them to eat our people, like where the 411, where the missing people are at? Is there any connection to human beings being used as food, as a trade?
Okay, Andrew will give you Art the offline. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Okay. Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, which of the thoughts do you tracking into the organ?
Okay, Andrew, I can't understand you again. You're all distorted.
How's that?
Okay, now I can hear you.
Okay, Richard A. Cox, who was known as Clackamas, was former CIA, and he told me that our Air Force was providing human source for one of
Okay, we just can't, JC, we just can't, his phone is malfunctioning or something.
That was working good most of the night, and toward the end, it just blares out or peters out or something.
I don't know. That is really interesting. But what's your feeling? Do you feel like in any of these underground bases, they have off-world visitors?
Oh, yeah. You can go all the way back. You remember the old Phil Schneider story, man. I just listened to his the other day. He claimed that the military or somebody knew about it, or government, whoever, and he was a contractor that went in. They were drilling underneath these mountains, so they go down these big shafts, and they end up drilling through to one of these interdimensional or alien grays, whatever. They had already been there for how many thousands of years. But anyway, there was a battle that ensued, and he lost 3 fingers, and Green Beret got killed allegedly, and all this stuff. So, and listen, Mary told me there's a lot going on there, and she's got corroborating witnesses that had worked there, and she actually looked, and a lot of people looked at satellite image. They came in and would do some weird construction work one day, and the next day it's gone. It looks like they never did anything on like the base of a mountain. So what's that tell you?
It is something going on. I think we might have Andrew back. We'll try it one more time. Andrew, are you back?
I am. Are you there?
Yeah. You just seemed like a fade out into the distortion. That's what it's doing.
I think it's outside interference because I prepared my phone with exquisite care this afternoon. What I was saying was there were 2 times that the U.S. Department of Defense facilitated ET contact. One was with 2 tall grays near the Manzana weapons storage area in New Mexico, and one was the Dulce base. In order to get into that approximately 200 stories of elevator, my dad and I had to be cleared by medium-sized grays. They were in control of the Dulce base up on the Archuleta Mesa of northern New Mexico.
Very
so that
interesting.
means that implies that we're not in control of every location in our great land.
But, too, Mary Joyce, JC, back a couple of years ago, she was talking, too, that NATO troops were around this one base you were talking about, and they were in control. So it makes you wonder, what is going on out there?
Yeah. Oh, you're right. And I actually took 2 different maps. One was missing people. One was where cryptids were sighted, a bunch of cryptids. Another one was where the allegedly underground bases in national forests. And if you took all 4 of those and overlapped them, you'd be amazed at how many overlap and color in of big blocks areas. Now, does that mean anything? I don't know, but to me it says something.
Andrew, what's your feeling?
Well, I mean, the Dulce base was 200 stories of elevator with nothing in it. I mean, imagine a typical shopping mall, really anywhere in the country, but instead of 2 stories, let's say, for stuff being sold there, it was 200 stories.
Wow.
But in order to get into the first level, right on the surface, we had to be cleared by medium-sized grays. They were in control of the Dulce base. And there weren't the hybrids and all these stories about the Dulce base. It was just 200 stories of absolutely nothing.
Nothing?
And when I said to my dad, why did you take me? This was in 1971, I believe. He said, there's going to be a big disaster. And I said, when? He said, long after I'm gone, son, but not when I am. So we think it may be the Nibiru return, as it's spoken of, some kind of celestial event that may cause the human race to have to go underground. But as I've long stated, I would not like to live underground, So,
well, I wouldn't want to live underground. You ever see the original Time Machine movie? What was it, Warlocks, whatever they were, that lived underground? Morlocks, yeah. And they ate basically bred humans as food.
Yeah, we always become somebody's food.
Well, they say human is humane and tastes good. I don't know. I never tried it.
I don't know.
Hey, Andrew, our time is up, and I'm sorry that we were having phone, whatever was going on. Is there, you got 3 minutes. Is there anything you want to say to my listeners?
Just know that we're entering a great era of positive political and technological development.
And we just lost him again. Could somebody be jamming his phone?
I'm telling you, it's weird because it worked great. We checked it all a few days this week, and it was working good earlier in the show, but seems like as soon as he gets to certain things, it disappears. I don't know. It goes distorted, and then you don't hear him. Fades right out.
Well, who's our guest next week? And by the way, until I get better, again, it's going to take me another few weeks to recover from the heart attacks. But so I'm going to be cutting the show down to Thursdays and Fridays for the next foreseen future. I have the stamina to do this back 3 or 4 nights a week. So who's our guest next week?
Hey, next Thursday, we have Stanley Milford coming on. He was known as the Paranormal Ranger, man. Him and his buddy, Jonathan Dover, they were like the X-Files of the reservation for many years. They covered UFOs, crashes, cryptids, ghosts. They even had a case, Gary, where coins came out of the thin air. They still got the coins.
I would like to have a bucket of coins, wouldn't you?
Yeah, keep sending them.
And who's our next guest after that?
Hey, next Friday we have George Haas coming on, man. He's got a fantastic book and research on structures on Mars. Listen, Mary Joyce would be thrilled to see his stuff. Yeah, he's got incredible stuff. He's going to have pictures and everything, so that's going to be a good one.
Well, everybody, tell your friends about the show and make sure you give us a thumbs up after the show. And please, this is very important because our sponsors look at this. Leave a comment, not on here, on chat. After the show is done, just go on and leave your feedback on the comment section and give us a thumbs up. Well, till next Thursday, everybody have a good one. I tell you what, we had Thanksgiving dinner tonight. We actually had Thanksgiving. We had 2 turkeys, and, yesterday for Christmas, we had, I can't even think about it, prime rib. And tonight we had another turkey. And we're going to have turkey for the next couple nights.
Yeah,
I'm really upset. The doctor said no more soda, no more ice cream, no more beef, no pork, nothing grease, no potatoes. And I said, well, what is there left?
Lettuce.
Learn to eat fish.
Yeah, I just had some today.
Oh, well, I'm not a fish eater. Well, everybody have a good one. We will catch you next Thursday. And again, I want to thank everybody out there on chat and everybody that listens to the show. We are well over 200,000 subscribers on YouTube, pulling 1 million downloads per episode on all the apps. So worldwide, by the way, worldwide. I get emails from people from Scotland, Ireland, from the Philippines, from India, from Vietnam, Canada, Mexico, Puerto Rico. I mean, I get everybody listening to the show, I guess. So everybody have a good one. We'll catch you on the other side.
Who's friends with all the night dreamers talking to you at night? Gary on the radio, but maybe he's not in sight. Bigfoot's on his tail, flying UFOs, that's right. Gary's talk show radio, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday nights. If you need a friend to talk to, he will always be there. The Night Dreamers talk show will fix your despair. If you want to talk conspiracies, Night Dreamers is for you. Top secret case, alien space, it's Gary with the news. Tune in on the radio, don't let Big Brother know. They're listening to everything, even Gary's late night show. If you need a friend to talk to, he will always be there. The Night Show Dreamers.